Hey everyone, welcome back to another Josh Wonders Why. It's been a while. It's been about a month, right?
I don't know.
Last time we met was
Long time.
end of June, and then we took
That's right.
July
Because
off.
camp was the first week of July, so.
That's right, and I was on vacation for the majority of July. So I'm a little rusty. I was surprised I even found where this office was, to be honest, to do the broadcast tonight. So welcome all of you to Josh Wonders Why. If you're new to this, it's just a weekly discussion except for July, where Kelly and I tackle a variety of topics related to religion, food, the news, the weather, pretty much anything that's on our minds or on your minds as well. So tonight's topic, as I teased about this morning, we will be discussing Adam and Eve. And maybe just some background. We were doing a different Josh Wonders Why, I think, end of May or early June. I don't recall what the topic was. I should have done my research, but I did not come prepared at all. But we mentioned something about, or alluded to that maybe the Adam Eve story wasn't real and it was a myth. And someone in the comments is like, wait, what are you talking about? So
Yeah.
we tabled that because we had some topics for June, and now we're back, and this would be the first topic to cover. And it's I'm glad that you're back with us, because I think I sent you just a list of all the questions, and I'll say, hey, you answer all of them. I'm not going to do any research tonight.
Alrighty. I'm ready.
So, and also just, I mean, for this too, I mean, these discussions are for you all watching us. So if there are other topics or things we bring up that maybe you'd like us to dive more deep into, just let us know in the comments or through a post or whatnot. We'd love to talk about what's relevant to you or what you enjoy listening to. So, with that being said, let's tackle Adam and Eve. And maybe it makes sense to start before their story, maybe talk about the book of Genesis. What was its purpose, and, how was it written? Because I assume tradition suggests that Moses wrote it based off of direction from God, right?
And that's the tradition.
Okay. So maybe if you could help us understand that a little bit more and go to some more background there. Moses
didn't write the book of Genesis.
Okay, that's the first mini bubbles that's going to be busted tonight.
Yep. So it's important to think about the biblical narratives as not being eyewitness accounts, but they didn't get recorded when they happened, right? So many years later, ancient people began to write them down. There's a scholarly approach to the Old Testament that suggests there were 4 groups of people who wrote different parts of Genesis, and then at some point they were all put together.
Okay.
So that helps explain why there are 2 different creation accounts in Genesis, because Genesis 1 is not the same as Genesis 2 and 3.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to make those fit together, which a lot of people they mesh those 2 stories together and just tell it as one story of creation, but they're 2 different stories. And it's important to treat them as 2 different stories because they were written by 2 different people or groups of people, and they had a point to make. So trying to make them fit together is really kind of impossible. So taking that in mind, even the ancient writers did not take this as literal.
Really?
Yeah, because otherwise they would have figured out a way to just have one creation story.
Okay.
But if you have 2 and they don't agree with each other, you can't take either one of them literally. The other thing about Genesis is that and
with that, I guess real quick, because I found this, because I need to go back and read Genesis, because I think that's something that I mentioned that oh man, I don't have this. Sorry, I am. Okay, it was basically, like you said, is they combined different styles and sources of work, and they're not embarrassed by duplications of particular episodes. Like you said, the creation account, there's also 2 flood stories. There's a couple different stories that they talk. There's a wife-sister story that's repeated a couple times. And there's multiple accounts of Jacob's change of name to Israel and the founding of Bethel and so on and so forth. And it goes throughout maybe the first part of Genesis. There are duplicate stories that they just said, here's what we have from tradition, and they just put them down there as a historical context of what the traditions were at the time.
Yeah. And the first few chapters of Genesis are, they're prehistory. Like, nobody was writing things down then.
Yeah.
And they are largely mythical because there are other ancient writings that predate Genesis that tell some of the same stories. They have a creation story, they have a flood story, and they're very similar to what's in the Bible. Before Genesis, there was the Enuma Elish, which describes how the god Marduk became king of the gods and the chief god of Babylon. And the beginning of Genesis reads a lot like that ancient writing, Enuma Elish. So the difference is that, unlike the other myths, this creation story in Genesis is it's kind of like the Israelites in your face to Babylon.
Okay.
So it's like saying, our God is better than any of your gods. And it's important also to know that back in the ancient days, they didn't have the idea of just one God. They thought there were lots of gods, but their God was the best. And so the other difference is that in Genesis, God created humankind in the image of God. But in the other myths, the gods would create humans to be their slaves.
Yeah.
So, it is a retelling of a myth, but it's in a way of saying, our God is the best. And we get the better of the deal when it comes to gods.
I never thought about it that way, about saying that's sticking it to Babylon, saying we're better than you. I always thought it was, they may have written this once the fall of, Jerusalem, or what am I thinking of? Yeah. And they may have written this in retrospect to show, maybe their followers and the Jews at the time, our God is loving or whatnot. But I do like your interpretation of they're sticking it to the man, and that's what I'm going to take from now on.
Yeah.
The book of Genesis is just that, right?
Because this was probably written around the time of the exile to Babylon.
Yes.
And so they needed to get their story together to encourage themselves to stay faithful to God. And so if you think about it in terms of, we've been taken captive by Babylon, but we will not become like them. We will stay true to our roots, so to speak.
Okay.
Peter Enns, who wrote this book, Genesis for Normal People, and I recommend anything he writes. Peter Enns, E-N-N-S. I recommend him. He's funny, and it's very down to earth and easy to understand. But he said, think of the Old Testament as Israel's story written in light of national trauma to encourage continued faithfulness to God. So think of it that way. Don't get bogged down into, well, it has to be literally true, or I can't trust anything in the Bible. That's not the way it works. Think of it in terms of this was a retelling of a common myth, but in the eyes of people of the Israelites.
Okay.
So, like Genesis 2 and 3, that seems to try to answer, or at least bring up the questions that are, the perennial questions. How did we get here? Why do we hate snakes so much? Why is there pain in childbirth? Why, Why is it so hard to work the earth? So it attempts to answer those questions. And there's also a really old tale from the Near East called the Epic of Gilgamesh, which always makes me think of the Smurfs, because wasn't that the evil guy? Wasn't his name Gilgamesh? I don't
something
know.
like that. I can't remember.
So some of the motifs in Gilgamesh are also in Genesis, in the creation story of Genesis. So
that being said, I mean, Adam and Eve were based off of real people, right?
Well, let's unpack that a little bit.
Okay.
So the word Adam in the Hebrew Bible means humankind, or the human species in general. Adamah was the name of the type of soil that was there. It was a reddish soil. So, because Adam was formed out of the earth, right? Mm-hmm. So Adam is the personal name of the first human. So genealogy was really important to the Jewish people. But since nobody was keeping records that far back, it makes sense for them to just say, okay, Adam. Everybody traces their genealogy back to Adam, meaning the first human or the beginning of humankind. So it doesn't necessarily mean that there was a person named Adam.
Okay. Is it similar, like we would name the first person Guy? Like, hey, it's Guy.
I guess.
I don't know.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, yes.
The interesting thing is that in the Hebrew Bible, there's not a lot of reference made to the narrative of human rebellion in the Garden of Eden. It's not really mentioned. Unlike in the New Testament, where, that's where original sin is traced back to Adam and Eve, and blame is placed on them. And that was just a later theological development, just like the snake that became Satan. Original sin, responsible for the fall of humankind, whose punishment is a difficult life followed by death. But none of that is in Genesis.
Okay.
So, but we've been taught that. So when we hear the Genesis story, when we hear about Adam and Eve, we think, oh, the snake is actually Satan. And in the New Testament, in John, Jesus calls Satan the father of lies. But in Genesis 2 and 3, the snake is honest. The snake tells them, if you eat of this tree, you will become like God, which was true.
Yeah.
So there's nothing in there to say that snake was Satan.
Well, I mean,
it was just a snake.
It was Satan before the fall, before he fell as the falling star, right?
Right, yeah. Let's not go there.
Okay.
We don't have time for all that.
So with Adam and Eve, the thing that I always struggled with, because I felt like they were legit peoples, because when you go to Noah, it traces genealogy from here's Noah to Seth, Adam to Seth, all the way down to Noah.
Right.
And I think then if you go to Joseph, or who's the father of Israel? Who am I thinking of? Is it Joseph? No.
Well, Abraham.
Sorry, you go to Abraham and Joseph.
Jacob
that genealogy
and Isaac.
Always traces back to Noah. So I'm like, well, based off of those accounts, it's got to be legit that it traces back to Adam, and Adam was some person that they
Well, I hate to
trace
tell you
back
this,
to.
but the flood story is also a myth.
Well, then how are they tracing it back? How is Abraham traced back to Noah?
Because that's how they told it.
So that genealogy between Adam and Noah is all myth, and it was made up? They made up those names, or maybe they're all myths based off all those characters.
I don't know. They they could have been actual people, but remember, nobody was keeping track.
Yeah.
So that may be just oral history of these people, because like I said, genealogy was important.
Yeah.
So yeah, but everybody traces their genealogy back to the beginning of humankind. So we know, based in good science and archaeology, we know that, you know, the first humans were whatever their names are. They've given them names. You know, the remains that they've found and, you know, dated back, you know, we know that there was some kind of evolution happening with humans. And I'm not saying that we came from monkeys. I'm not saying that. But because of the human remains that they have found, we can see there's this progression.
Well, even you think about not like we'll say the extreme. That's another Josh Winner's why for evolution of the Bible, but you know, progression of animals or like you said, monkeys, humans, or whatever. But even then, at the time, humans were just shorter, tinier than they are now, right? So even to go from a tinier to a taller, that's some sort of evolution in the chain of humanity, right?
Yeah, you know.
So not evolution is the most extreme, but there is.
You know, evolution is not the boogeyman that people want to make it out to be. But you know, the people that wrote Genesis only knew what they knew.
Yeah.
They don't know what we know, so we have to keep that in mind too. And I see, Gargamel. Oh,
yeah,
it was
Gargamel.
Gargamel.
Yeah, it was close. Maybe that was based off of Gargamel.
Ashley also needs a story time for Noah too. So yes, the thing about Noah, not to go off topic too much, but you did bring up Noah and the flood. The story of the flood is found in other ancient writings as well, like the Epic of Gilgamesh. There's a flood story in that as well. No geological evidence has been found to support a flood that covered the earth. But remember, the earth was pretty small for the people then. You know, it wasn't, they didn't think that the earth was round, so, you know, it was a very small, so for them to say it covered the entire earth, well, that was a small area.
Yeah.
And so this whole idea of the flood and kind of God starting over, it's present in other ancient writings as well as scripture, and they're very similar accounts. So, you know, is it important that it be literally true, or is there truth in it any way you look at it? You know, and I thought this was interesting. You know, God put a rainbow in the sky, signifying that he would never do that again. And in, I think it was Gilgamesh, bow, it's the same word bow for like bow as a weapon. And in one myth, the storm god whose wind blew over the earth after the flood, as at the first creation, this storm god stored his bow in the clouds permanently so that it would not be used again. So I think, you know, they kind of switched that up. It's not a weapon, it's a rainbow. It's a beautiful sign.
Again, to stick it to the Babylonians that were.
Yeah. Our God did the rainbow thing. Your God just had a lousy bow, you know.
So Adam and Eve, they were not actual people potentially, but maybe just symbolic of the first humans that existed. So I've always struggled with, if they're really the first two humans, how do they populate the earth? There was a lot of, because if you think about it, I don't know, unless at the time they only named the sons of Adam and Eve, not the daughters, because they're patriarchal. There was some breeding going on that was probably questionable, but unless there are other groups of people that were scattered about, but God
Right.
was spotlighting Adam and Eve. So it makes sense that it was maybe the first group of people, first human beings.
Yeah, so
in a tribe or something.
If Adam means humankind,
yeah.
Could it not be that God created a community of people, not just two people? You know, it's just the story that they told of their beginnings.
Yeah.
Just like other ancient people told a story of their beginnings, but this story told by the Israelites paints a different picture than the others because they are focused on their God being the one true God and the most powerful God, and how their God entrusted all living things to humankind, and humankind was made in the image of God, unlike these other myths that really, the gods created humans just to be their slaves, and they weren't given anything.
Yeah.
So, yes, it's a myth, but the way the myth is told, it speaks their truth.
Okay.
And we all have those questions, how was everything created? Where did we begin? We all have those questions. Every human's had those questions. And so, we're not the first to try to explain that. The ancient peoples explained it in their own way.
Yeah.
Knowing what they knew then.
Yeah, I think like I may have paraphrased this before, but one of the things I found was at least this scholar is saying Genesis is not a scientific or historical textbook in the modern sense. It's a narration of the ancient Israel's traditions and concepts of the past. It's a mixture of myths and legends, cultural memories, revisions of tradition, and literary brilliance is what they say. So it's a combination of all their old traditions.
Okay, wait. Because Ashley asked, but Noah was real and his family in the weird tent stuff.
What's this weird tent stuff? I can't remember. I'm trying to think what the tent stuff is.
That's when.
Is it when they peeked at Noah?
Yes.
Okay, that's
yes.
the same. Okay, yes.
And that may be where this all started. I don't remember because we were talking about Juneteenth and racism and all that.
Maybe.
So,
yeah.
Yeah. So was that real? I don't know. But it was part of the story. It was part of their story, and we know that storytelling is so important. Storytelling is what, forms a community and keeps a community together. It's just like a church where, there are these stories of people in the church for generations, and it helps define that congregation. Just like families, we have family stories, and it defines who we are as a family. And like I've shared this before, that our daughter, who we adopted, had no history of her family because she was removed at the age of 3. So she remembered very little of her family, and I think what she remembered was just told to her. And very few pictures. And so she would make up stories about her family.
Yeah.
Because stories are important to us. That's what we need to focus on in the book of Genesis. They were telling their story to help define who they were. And no matter where they were still the people of God. So that's what's important. Whether or not all these stories are literally true, it is not the point. Even for the authors of these stories, the point wasn't this is true and factual. The point was this tells us who we are.
So I know we're going to have a topic with Adam and Eve, but I guess so are any people, any characters mentioned in Genesis real, or they're all based off of
No,
tradition? Because
I think there are real people.
Because I think, with Exodus and so on, I think that starts with Moses, which he is a real person.
And so was Abraham.
Yeah, so that's what I'm wondering is, so were Joseph and all the 12 sons of Israel, were they all real, or were they all representations
I think so.
of a tribe?
I think so. And maybe Noah was a real person, and maybe these people were real people.
Okay.
But
at some point,
whether or not they were, they are they're part of the story, and they're part of the genealogy. And we know that Abraham was real because that's where the Israelites came from.
But also Islam splits off
Well,
from Islam
yes.
as well, and they have the same tradition, right? The same father, in a way. Okay.
Yeah. So I think when we get farther along, there's probably more truth to it, more fact to it, because it happens later on. But if we're looking at Adam and Eve, that's prehistory.
Yeah.
That's nobody knows. That's why all the ancient civilizations made up these stories.
Okay.
Because nobody knows.
So at some point in Genesis, it transitions from prehistory to history.
Yeah, I think so, probably.
Start to become real, or at least based off real people.
And remember, if it's true that there were like 4 different groups of people that wrote these stories, that was like, they weren't all writing them at the same time. So some of the stories are going to be more recent than others.
Yeah, okay. Ashley is asking, bring up the topic I wanted to cover next, with going back to Adam and Eve, is that it seems like, looking at Adam and Eve, a lot is put on her. She's blamed for, I guess it's going back, we were talking about this before we started, but with the story of Adam and Eve, Adam is tasked with naming everybody to show his dominance, and when Eve is created, he names her woman, which sort of, in a way, reflects his dominance over her, but also...
Well, plus he was she was made out of a rib bone, like under his arm.
And then, and I'll ask that, I'll table that question for next, but then also, the fall of man is put on Eve, like she's the one that... was tempted by the snake, although Adam also took a bite of the apple, but...
He was there.
But it was her fault, right?
Yep.
So is that reflective to Ashley's point? Is that reflective in just the need to drive the patriarchal society at the time and say, why is the man the head of the house, I guess? Or is there something else going on?
The answer is patriarchy.
Okay.
Yeah. So also her punishment was being subject to her husband. That was part of her punishment. Mm-hmm. And so then that was used later on to support the idea of patriarchy.
Okay.
Well, God said, women are going to be subject to the men. So it's interesting that the name Eve is related to the word for life.
Okay. And
she is the mythological, maternal ancestor of all humans, right? She's the beginning, the mother of everybody. But she is also the one who causes us all to die. Well, because of her sin and her punishment. Now, in Greek myth, Pandora was responsible for all human woes, and early Christian writers claim that the serpent deceived Eve by his cunning. So there, it's all mixed up, So, this Greek mythology then comes into play with, that's why men are, have the power and authority over women, because Eve, which makes no sense.
So Tony made a comment. Jimmy Carter once said that all our problems come from abroad. Ching. So I do find, with that thought of, I guess, sticking it to the Babylonians or whatever with showing how their God is different, I do, and maybe I'm remembering this wrong, but even though Adam blames Eve, God punishes both of them, right? He doesn't just punish Eve. It's okay,
right.
Eve, you're out. Both of you are going to leave, right?
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I've never understood that, because it says, it even says he was with her at the time.
He didn't talk her out.
He didn't even, he didn't ask. He didn't say, whoa, wait a minute, Abe, we're not supposed to do this. Nope. He just stood there and then took the fruit and ate it. So, the idea that the fruit was an apple comes from the words for evil and apple are homonyms, malice and malice, or malus and malus. So it's not said that it's an apple tree.
Really?
Yep.
Okay.
And that's where you get the idea that it was an apple.
Does it say it says it's a serpent but not a snake, right? Well, I guess you could. I got to look back.
Well, because serpent, snake, I don't know what the difference is, but it's supposedly they had legs
at the time, because then that's how.
And then the snake was, made to crawl on its belly from then on out. Which also, I can understand back in ancient times, snakes were even scarier. But I don't think snakes are all that bad. I don't want one. I do not want one in my house. Okay.
You have cats; they'll take care of the snake.
The snake will take care of the cats. So again, they wrote what they knew at that time, and we know so much more now. Like we know that not all snakes are poisonous and deadly, but for them, a snake was a snake.
So go back to Adam and Eve for the longest time, and I'm not sure if this was taught to me in Sunday school or I don't know if I was taught somewhere, but I believe when I was a kid that men had one less rib than women because of Adam and Eve. Now you can find that funny, but that's at some point it was taught to me, or I
believe it.
Like, okay,
I believe you were told that. Sure.
I remember trying to feel to say, well, where's the gap in my rib cage? Like, I'm missing one rib.
So Ashley says, where did Lilith come into play? That's a whole nother story.
I don't know anything. What is Lilith, or is that?
Well, we'll have to have a story time for that too.
Okay.
I guess.
Well, we can table that. I'll add that to the list. Lilith and Noah are the. Well, I think we pretty much covered Noah, but we can go back and talk about that. So that's interesting. So I guess coming back to the beginning, the question we were trying to answer was, were Adam and Eve real people? And the question is, most likely not. They're based off traditions. They're representations of the human race.
Well, let's just say, though, that at some point there were humans that started the human race. So Adam and Eve technically were real people.
But they weren't named Adam.
But, Adam is the name for humankind and Eve is the name for life.
Yeah.
And so maybe the first humans didn't really have names. I don't know.
Yeah.
But but I think the important thing to remember is this is a retelling of Israel's story for a time that they had been through this exile and everything.
And it's interesting. I want to, if you missed the beginning of this, it was interesting because I never thought about this before. That part of these old stories or the myths that were at the beginning were sort of retellings of the Babylonian myths, but to paint that the Jewish God was superior to the Babylonian God because it has compassion and love, right? So it's interesting that I never thought about it. It's Genesis is essentially sticking it to the Babylonians to say, well, our God is better than your God, and here's why, right?
In your face.
In your face.
In your face, Babylon.
So, and it goes back to just considering as you read the Bible, take into account, you can take into account present day traditions, but also think back at the history of when it was written, why was it written at the time, in history, and not try to modernize the telling of some of these stories, right? And taking your modern mind into why it was written.
And stop stressing out about, oh, it has to be literal or I can't believe anything in it. That's not the point. You know, the Bible is not a manual for life. It is not a how-to book. It is not eyewitness accounts. That's just not how it was written. You know, Revelation isn't the story of the rapture and all that. That is not literal. Mm-hmm. It wasn't intended to be taken literally, just like these stories. And I don't know how people who are staunch supporters of everything in the Bible is literal, how they reconcile these two different creation stories. Like, I've never been to the Creation Museum. Do they separate the two, or do they just kind of mesh the two together?
I'll have to ask my wife because she went there one time.
Yeah.
It was an eye-opening experience for her.
So, yeah, we all just need to relax about the literal part. And literally, I believe Jesus was a real person. And I believe that Jesus died and was resurrected. Mm-hmm. And that's what's important for me. You know, yeah. Is it important that Adam and Eve were literally the first two people on earth? That's not important to me.
Yeah.
That's not important to believing the gospel. So do we just need to keep that in mind?
Yeah. That's good. I guess if there are other stories from the Bible that you are curious about, if they actually happened or not, let us know if there's other ones. Like we have Noah, we have Lilith. I'm thinking some of the, some other stories from the Old Testament, which are questionable if they actually happen or not. We can dive into those in the future. But if there's any stories that are on your mind that maybe you've always been struggling with, hey, how did this happen?
Yeah, did we ever talk about Jael? She's like my favorite.
Yeah, we could talk. I think we did at one point.
Did we?
We did a
yeah.
favorite.
And Deborah.
Deborah, yes.
You know, Deborah the judge. You know, patriarchy wasn't always.
Well, I was a wonder about Samson, if that was real story. Like he cut his hair and just lost his strength. But
or is that a metaphor for something?
Interesting. I think we came up with what we're going to talk about for the next year. No, but. No, it was eye-opening.
Jonah, Ashley suggested
Jonah. Yeah, Jonah's a good one too, yeah. So we'll bring that up, yeah. So, yeah, definitely there's tons these are stories we can capture and discuss in the future, Josh Wonders Why. So, thanks for enlightening us on Adam and Eve and bursting some of our bubbles, but, you know, helping us come away with maybe a more appreciation for the Old Testament, especially Genesis, and how not to take everything so literally. Mm-hmm. And just, you know, take into account maybe the purpose and why it was written at the time.
Yeah, we might want to talk about all the genocide in the Bible.
Yeah.
It's another thing that people struggle with.
Yeah, that's good. I'll add that to the list of all the questions we're going to capture. So I think that's it. Appreciate you coming on and enlightening us. Thank you all for the discussion and all the questions you've asked and all the comments. Thanks also for watching, and we'll be back live on Thursday for another Digging Deep with Kelly, and then we'll be back again next Monday for another Josh Wonders Why. And I have not determined what I'm going to wonder about, so I'm going to spend the rest of the week wondering about that.
But I keep reminding him, we still have snacks.
We do have snacks. But if you have any other questions or topics you've been wondering about, feel free to put those in there, and we'll add that to the list, ever-growing list of discussions. So until next time, thank you all for watching, and have a good rest of your night.